Hello and welcome to everyone for joining our 8th Landlord Investor webinar today. I'm d.clarke. I'm the Lettings and Property Management Director at Nock Deighton with over 30 years experience in the Shropshire and Worcestershire lettings market. Today I'm joined by just one guest speaker. We normally have two, but we've got one today who's Paul Shamplina. Paul has spent over 28 years in the legal field, helping landlords with problem tenants, with previous experience working as a clerk, a private investigator, a debt collector, and a certified bailiff. And what he's just told me, he's also done some boxing. And I'm sure most of you will also recognise Paul from the TV show Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. Paul will be telling you a little bit more about himself shortly, so I'll leave that part to him. This is a live Q&A session. I have received a number of questions ahead of today from those who've registered and are either watching now or will be watching the recording. All those attending the live presentation today will also have the opportunity to ask Paul a question by entering that in the chat box, and I'll read that out when we go through the questions. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Paul. So, first of all, Paul, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you've sort of ended up where you are today?
Yes, of course, Dawn. Pleasure being here, everyone. Dawn, we met a long time ago. I was just trying to work it was at Lillishall, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes, you came and presented it when I was representative of Arla. You did one of my my Arla regional meetings. So yes, that was where we first
That was a long time ago. Yeah. So thank you for having me on. So yeah, I'm Paul Shamplina. I've been helping landlords for the best part of 30 years. My background, as you said, Dawn, is I started off in the legal profession. I worked in the 88, 90 in the recession where the good old interest rate went up to 14, 15%. We are slightly mature, Dawn, so we remember those times, don't we?
We do.
Where if you say to a landlord in the last 5 to 10 years that you had 15% interest rate, they'd think you were from Mars, to be honest. So I'd worked in the legal profession. Then I'm working with a couple of law firms, specialised. I issued my first possession claim working in a law firm in 1991. So that shows how long I've been in the industry, helping landlords and letting agents. And then I became a private investigator and a bailiff, process server, but doing fixed fee eviction. And then did loads of different things, a lot of stuff quite on the front line, collecting council tax, removing travellers and squatters, doing process serving. Yeah, it had quite a few incidents, to say the least, but basically I'd always done landlord and tenant eviction, and met my previous business partner in Landlord Action, who had 25 illegal immigrants living in a 3-bed house in northwest London. And I evicted them. I did it for fixed fees while working with a firm of solicitors. And out of that meeting, we used to have an office in the same office block down the road in Mill Hill in northwest London. And then we started Landlord Action in 99, 2000. I can't believe it's like 22 years later. And then the birth of Buy to Let happened in 2003. Landlord Action is 3 steps, fixed fees. In 2013, we made it a regulated firm of solicitors. So at the moment in Landlord Action, I've got 17 staff. We do the best part of 1,500 cases a year. We are busier now more than ever before. I predicted it in recent press that I think that in 2022 there's going to be the best part of 80,000 possession claims, double what was happening, bearing in mind we came out of COVID and the courts were suspended. In 2017, I sold Landlord Action to a company called Hamilton Fraser. And we own loads of multiple brands in the private rental sector. We own My Deposits, the deposit scheme, the property redress scheme, Client Money Protect. They're free government-backed schemes within the industry. We also own a really well-known website which I run called Landlord Zone, which is a landlord self-managed website. We started 4 businesses in lockdown, believe it or not. We started a mortgage brokers. We started a deposit replacement alternative called Home. We started a mediation business when the eviction notices went to 6 months. So we do a lot of mediation, which is going to form part of the eviction process in the future. And I can talk to you about that in more detail later. And we started HF Assist, which was a letting agent advice line taken and giving advice by ex-letting agents. We've got over 600 members doing that. So we do all that, and then everyone knows me also. I mean, people do stop me on the street and think that I evict tenants myself full time. I don't do that. I do it for the TV cameras, and I filmed 6 series of Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, which has been a big hit. A lot of people obviously know me for that. And I filmed that just before lockdown. And ironically, Dawn, very ironically, on the day that I'm on your webinar, I'm on TV tonight.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not on Love Island, unfortunately. I'm on the ITV Tonight programme at 8:30. It's called Living in Crisis. It's about evictions post-COVID. So I'm with Dan Hewitt, who's an esteemed political editor on ITV, and he broke the story about social housing conditions. But it's on tonight at 8:30. I did 3 days filming. They filmed in the office. They filmed me doing an eviction, just talking about the crisis. It's more tenant based, but I try and keep it balanced on behalf of landlords and speaking for landlords. So that's me. I mean, I do a whole lot of other stuff, a lot more campaigning and landlord and letting agent training. But yeah, that's essentially me. But my main day job is I'm Chief Commercial Officer for Hamilton Fraser, and I represent all the property brands within our group.
Wow, that is a big.
That's why I drink a lot of Red Bull.
It's a very, very busy diary. Goodness me. Do you have any spare time at all?
I do. Ironically, I went down to see Spurs play Brighton last night. Got home at 1 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, so I watch football, play football, go to the gym, and I love boxing. But just to get rid of frustration and anger when it comes to dealing with a stressful workplace.
Gosh, wow. Well, thank you so much for squeezing us into your very busy schedule. So first of all, then, on a question on the Nightmare Tenants and Landlords TV show, because there were some very extreme cases and horrific situations that we've probably all seen. And I'm quite glad to say, having had 30 years in property management, I've never dealt with anything as severe as that. Are they?
We could change that, Dawn. You could come on a TV programme with me with pleasure.
Are they real though?
Of course, they're real. They're not staged. I mean, people, I'm not on Only Way is Essex or Made in Chelsea. It's not all. They're real cases. They are the most extreme cases, and dare I say it, Dawn, these landlords do not use letting agents, which is part of the problem.
I was going to ask that, really. What do they all have in common? What is the sort of the main reason that it becomes that extreme?
The main reason is that 85% of landlords out there only own 1 or 2 properties. They don't see themselves as landlords. We have over 178 rules and regulation in renting out your property. We still get landlords that don't even put the deposit in the deposit scheme, and it came out in April 2007. We're now in 2022. And the Renters Reform Bill, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, that's going to be some of the biggest changes coming on. Landlords do not use letting agents. They might use them for let only. I mean, historically, one uses a letting agent because you believe that the tenant they're going to get is going to be a better tenant, there's going to be better reference, they're going to stay in the property longer, and there's going to be less void periods. But that doesn't always happen because half our business comes from letting agents, dare I say it. And then obviously you have environment conditions like COVID and people losing their jobs and all that stuff. But they are the extreme cases, that are shown on the TV show. But it's a lot of filming. It's 8-9 months filming. Every year I say I'm never going to do another one, and I get talked into do another one. But I've got a lot of resource. Part of my job is media for the group and education. But I do it. I do enjoy it. But actually, I'd say out of everything I do enjoy, the filming, I prefer live radio than filming TV. But actually, I prefer public speaking. I've always have done. So, I prefer, obviously, when we had COVID, I did something like 55 webinars, Zooms, Facebook Live. Actually, I struggled. I'll admit it, the first 4 weeks of COVID and lockdown, I really struggled mental health wise. I was all over the place. So I had to do an event every day just to engaging and updating and educating them, because everyone, we all thought we were going to fall off a cliff, with what was going on. But yeah, they're all real stories.
That's good. So what would you say, so I'm reading from this sheet now, in your view, what are the biggest challenges in the market, in the lettings market right now?
So, well, it's a twofold question, because you could ask that to letting agents and you could ask that to landlords. Obviously, this is a landlord roadshow on Zoom. So the biggest challenge is going to be regulation. It's keeping up to speed with what's happening, when it's happening. Are the figures stacking up? Is your buy-to-let paying? What are you in for tax-wise? Are you business planning? As a landlord, this is a business. I mean, I've got a website called paulshamplina.tv, and I do an online course, which is a debate, self-manage or not to self-manage, okay? And I debate with 2 corporate landlords and a letting agent. And I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, Dawn, I've been encouraging more than ever landlords to use letting agents on full management, because you've got it is 85% of landlords out, 90% of landlords out there have a full-time job, you know. And really, I ask a landlord, and I say to a landlord, I say, do you want to take a call from your tenant at 5 in the morning that they've lost their keys because they're drunk, you know, or the boiler's broken down? And I think landlords don't put a price on their time. So landlords, you know, it is the regulation. It is a worry about rent arrears, yes, and whatever. But I think, you know, with regard to rent arrears, and I say that on the programme tonight, I've never seen rent arrears as high as they are at the moment. I'm talking about landlords that have had over 12 months rent arrears because of the courts and all that stuff. So regulation, most probably, I would say, is most probably the biggest challenge. But let's be very clear on a positive note, and I say that to all the landlords out there, tenant demand is stronger than ever. Stronger than ever. I mean, you're based in Shropshire. I speak to letting agents all over the country. I speak to big landlords. I've got mates that I've got a mate that's got 800 properties he's got 800 tenants, sorry, in Brighton and Eastbourne, around there. And he said the demand is crazy, you know. So it's really, you know, there is a real shortage of stock out there, which is a big issue for agents. So I think as a landlord, long term, it works. And of course, rents are going up. You can't stop that from happening.
Yeah, that's the same with us, really, is that there's just very, very low supply, huge demand. I mean, we put a property on recently at our Worcestershire branch, and 10 viewings yesterday.
Wow.
And most of them wanted to apply. I think 8 out of 10 of them wanted to apply, and it's really difficult for tenants as well, because they just can't find the right properties. It's
really difficult for tenants, and of course, you know, we haven't even touched about the abolishment of Section 21 and the effects of the Renters Reform Bill and landlord redress and all that stuff. But I think as a landlord, and this is the landlord market we're talking to, you know, the key is, and I say this in all the talks and all the various different seminars I do, you know, your landlord who's instructing you to rent that property out and you have 10 tenants, the beauty is you stroke agent stroke landlord, you will pick the tenant won't pick you. Yeah. And I think also there's a false economy where landlords think, oh, I can get an extra 50 quid a week for that, or an extra 80 quid. Actually, you know, I've got a tenant in Spain, I haven't put the rent up for 6 years. There's a saying in our world, and I'm a landlord as well, is no news is good news. You know, yeah. As long as my rent's being paid on time, you know, and I don't hear from my tenant. I mean, I know it's, you know, at the end of the day, the tenant is a customer. And I think that's the mindset that has to change as well. Then landlords are okay. They're happy with it, you know. But I think that there is more challenges than landlords. More small landlords are going to leave the market, especially with the biggest challenge is going to be the EPC change of rating C from 2025 coming in, where you're going to have some landlords that have properties, they're not up to spec. They've got to put cavity walls, they've got to put a whole load of stuff in, water meters, all that type of stuff. And it's going to cost them money. There's going to be issues with regard to installers. But, you know, if you've got a property in Durham, you know, and you've got an LHA tenant or UC tenant on, and they're paying you $6 a year, and it's 12 grand for 2 years, and you know, and the fit out with regard to the EPC upgrade is up, you know, it's 10 grand. Landlords going to think, you know, is it worth it? But there are big landlords that are coming, that are in the market, and they want to add to their stock. And we're seeing you know, 35% of the instructions we get at Landlord Action are Section 21 cases where landlords generally, from speaking to them, they are selling.
Really?
And that's going to increase in 2022.
Yeah. I mean, we've experienced a few landlords selling, but we've also experienced more sort of new investors coming into the market and buying as well. So it seems to be sort of balancing the books at the moment. But yeah, lots of changes.
Definitely, it will do. Because buy-to-let's 21% of the marketplace. Social housing has been declining 15%. Owner-occupied, you know, the market, you know, the average rent in the UK now is over £1,000 a month. As of last month, that never ever happened before. The average rent in London's 1,850 quid a month, and no tenant should be paying more than a third of their wages. But as landlords, yes, you've got to embrace change, unfortunately. If you don't want to embrace change, then you either sell, or if you don't want to deal with the change, you use a letting agent to fully manage, and that's where a lot of landlords are at crossroads, really, with regard to what they need to do and how they need to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next question relates to the Renters Reform Bill, which you've already alluded to, and the abolition of Section 21. So obviously we've got no date for that to happen yet, but we know it is going to happen. So it's a case of when and not if.
Yes, correct.
So how do you think that will actually affect the private rented sector?
So I actually said it would be one of the biggest changes to take in effect. Actually, I go back on that and I say the EPC coming in with regard to the change of properties up to a grade C is actually going to be the biggest change. It's going to cost landlords a lot more money. So I do a lot of government consultation. I'm on lots of working groups, and obviously I'll talk about that tonight. So the abolishment of Section 21, I predict, will happen in about 3 years. Okay, I think landlord redress and landlord registration will come in before them. So I represent the property redress scheme. We are a redress scheme for letting agents. We have just launched the trial of a landlord redress scheme with the National Residential Landlord Association. We sent 1 or 2 emails out. We've got over 1,500 people that have signed up for it. And the NRLA, effectively, those landlords are good landlords because they want to be compliant and understand, and they do self-manage. But you've got 2.3 million landlords out there, Dom. No one knows how many of those use letting agents on full management. But actually, the other scenario is if you've got landlords that are let only, they would have to be part of a redress scheme, okay, which means that the tenant is the consumer, and that's what it's all about. And there was a real swift change from the Deregulation Act from 2015 to now, where EPC, How to Rent Guide, retaliation eviction, and I gave evidence at Parliament relating to retaliation eviction, which is very, very, very tiny. We're talking about less than 1%. It's been made out to be bigger than what it is, but it does happen. But it's very tiny. Most of the time, a landlord evicts a tenant, which is a last resort, is because they haven't paid the rent, obviously. So abolishment of Section 21, for that to happen, and there is a working group at the moment that's happening, and it's involving Chris Pincher, the housing minister, and all that stuff, is you need to bring in mediation at some point. That will happen after serving a notice stage. So we've been engaging with the government relating to that. You need to strengthen the grounds of Section 8. At the moment, there's 17 grounds. I predict it will go up to about 22, 24 grounds. So selling a property, moving into a property, mandatory grounds. At the moment, there's only 2 mandatory grounds, which are rent arrears and obviously selling the property, but it's not clear. There needs to be more mandatory grounds. Landlords need to have faith that they can get their property back within a timely fashion, that the courts are working and they're not broken. You need bailiff reform, because there's issue with bailiffs. So you need to be able to use high court enforcement officers, which we do at Landlord Action. So we serve a notice, issue court proceedings, get the bailiffs in. And we are like, at Landlord Action, we're like emergency plumbers. You don't really want to call us out because you know it's going to cost you money, but we're there to help you. And we've ended up being, like, after 22 years of trading, and I'd say up to, for 16, 17 years, I was the guy taking the calls. It's like the landlord Samaritan line. You'll know this as an agent. You know, you can be like a landlord Samaritan. There's a lot going on, and there's frictions between landlords and tenants. But there is a step change. Tenants are customers. The better you treat your tenant, the longer they stay in the property, the more they treat it like a home, you know. And the other scenario is there is issues with regards, you've had we saw a lot of this happening in COVID with antisocial behaviour, which was a big problem, especially in HMOs and scenarios that happen. We saw unlawful evictions, all that. You know, a lot of landlords have used Section 21 because of antisocial behaviour. If that goes, there's an issue because landlords have to use Section 8. At the moment, it's a discretionary ground. Then you have to rely on witness statements, and tenants and other co-tenants and neighbours, they're too scared, they're intimidated, you know, and that's happened. So there's issues there. And you need more investment in the court system, which, to be honest, I believe Dominic Raab made a statement, I think something like 4, 5, 6 months ago. I can't remember now. We saw it on our website, Landlord Zone, which was that I think they guaranteed to invest more than £300 million in the court system, but you need more judges and you need more bailiffs, you know. So you need to put these reforms in place before you can think about abolishing it. Yes, it's been abolished in Scotland. Scotland's a tiny market. They have the first tier tribunal system, which I don't think really works. It's a free service. Yeah, so I mean, during COVID, they brought in all these different mechanisms relating to COVID and to slow up the eviction process, because they didn't want a mass avalanche of evictions and homelessness happening during a pandemic where we didn't have a vaccine. So I did agree with that, but it was really, really trying and troubling for tenants, but obviously for landlords as well, because landlords aren't banks.
Yeah, exactly. And how long now is it taking for a case to go to court for eviction?
So if you're serving a notice, so obviously the notice periods from the 1st of October 2021 went back to 14 days for a rent arrears eviction Section 8 notice and 2 months for a Section 21 notice. You're looking at the best part of 6 months, which, you know, give or take, and it depends on the court you're at. So, you know, they said there was something like 21,000, was it 12 or 21,000? I can't remember, court orders. So when the eviction ban was lifted, it was lifted on the 31st of May 2021, which I know very well. It happened to be my birthday, ironically, right? And I was doing loads of calls, press calls and all that. But you've got to realise, for the best part of 15 months, bar maybe 1 or 2 months, because you could evict, you couldn't do any evictions. So the landlords that had cases in the court system prior to COVID were the worst affected. I mean, we had some horrendous rent arrears cases, but we've got a debt recovery department now where everything we do, whether it's evictions or debt recovery, is fixed fees. And we're seeing a lot of landlords now, they want to get money orders and they want to enforce the money orders so that the tenant gets county court judgment, because the debts are bigger, they're 10, 15, 20 grand. But we've seen a record amount of landlords that have had over 12 months rent arrears. So now our debt recovery division, we've got people that just do debt recovery, you know, enforcing at court, which could be attachment of earnings or getting high court enforcement, or whatever it may be. We're seeing a lot more landlords going for that. But yeah, it can be slow. It depends on the court you're at. It can be a big issue, and it's stressful. You know, it's not just the bank. It's stressful. It's an emotional period of a landlord's life, especially they used to own the property, used to live in the property. And unfortunately, we try to calm it down, and I do a lot of education and training with my staff, who are all regulated solicitors and paralegals. Is landlords, unfortunately, when they are at the end of their tether, they can get a disease called landlord rage. I know. And you have to be able to talk it through with them and tell them not to go to the property, because of course you're relying on the court system and hearing dates and eviction dates, and it's quite frustrating. So we literally are dealing with landlords at the end of their tether, trying to get their property back because they need to sell, or they've had a divorce, or they need to move back in the whatever. Every circumstance is different.
Yeah. So when they bring in the changes, and if you think they might be in about 3 years' time, do you think they'll introduce different courts, specialist courts, to deal with specific cases at that point?
That's a good question, Dawn. So I was on the housing group, which was, I think I was in Leeds, I think in November or October 2019, before COVID, and they were talking, and so we had a debate and we were working and whatever. I think that might have been kicked into long grass, because the thing is, you need judges. You need more judges. You need to recruit judges. I know it's hard to recruit judges because I know the morale with judges is quite low. I know that some of the court buildings are so old and dated. I mean, I was on one seminar where there's a Bomford County Court down in Essex, this district judge that was talking. It's good to get an insight. He had a bucket in his office where there was dripping going in because they weren't fixing the courts and stuff. I think, you know, there's this, I mean, they tried to bring remote hearings in called review hearings, which were like pre-hearings in Section 8. They were a waste of time. 75% of the time, the judge didn't even call the landlord or tenant up. So, I mean, I employed one guy just to do review hearings. They've stopped it now. It was just a slowing up process. So do I think that the housing courts will come in? I haven't heard anything more from when the initial consultation happened. I think the Renters Reform Bill has overtaken that. Obviously, there's ROPA, which we can talk about. I think that's been kicked into long grass. I think landlord redress. We talk about lifetime deposits, open-ended tenancies, the abolishment of Section 21. I don't think they can't bring it all in at once. It's just too much. You've got to stagger it. basically. Housing court, I just think that there's a lot more they could do to improve the current housing court situation. There could be a lot more online access, a lot more educational tools that help tenants that are acting in person. I think, you know, the possession claims online service where you can issue a claim, you get a hearing date and whatever, that's really good actually. But now issuing a claim at court is harder than it's ever been. There's so much stuff you've got to look at. There's so many barriers, you know, and that's where, and over the course of time, you know, section 21s, there was in 2015, there was 35,000 possession claims just doing section 21. Last year, there was 9,000. Now that's going to increase, but there's so many barriers. You don't put the deposit scheme, don't have an HMO, don't serve the EPC gas safety or the how to rent guide. There's so many things that, so it's dwindling and it will go, but I think they've got to take their time. Yes, tenant groups are calling for it, and they called it a non-fault eviction, but there's always a fault, you know, there's always a reason why the landlord wants the property back. And I get that tenants should have greater security and stuff, but I remember going on Panorama a few years ago, and I got them in the office and we had a conversation, and it was, yes, it's a more tenant-centric piece. It might be a bit like what's happening later. And I was on it for 17 seconds, literally, because it was they tried to perceive it that landlords were evicting tenants willy-nilly, which they weren't, you know, because without tenants, there's no industry, no tenants, no landlords, no letting agents, you know. So, but it still is a good industry. And I say for any landlords out there, look after your tenants.
Yeah, and it's also encouraging to hear as well with the section 21 changes or the abolishment of it, is that they will introduce new grounds. So for that sort of end of the market where a landlord just wants to let out their property short term, if there's also a market there because there's demand for people who want to rent short term as well. So there was sort of fear that it was just going to kill off that end of the market. But like you say, if the grounds, there's going to be mandatory grounds there for you know, if a landlord wants to sell or move back into the property, then that will cover that side, won't it?
Yeah, it will. I mean, look, the short stay market is a different market. I mean, obviously, in COVID, that got battered because obviously people weren't, you know, going out. They weren't allowed to go out because of the COVID restrictions and stuff. But I mean, what will happen is with that market, they'll bring those tax implications up to date with the buy-to-let. You know, I remember doing an interview with Richard Quest on CNN in 2013 about Airbnb. And I said to him, you know, we do loads of subletting Airbnb cases where it's really easy to rent a property out and then just stick it online because Airbnb don't do anything about it. You know, because they don't clarify who the host is and do they have right to be able to sublet without consent. And I've even taken it up with the Lettings Industry Council. We've tried to have conversation with the short stay market, but it's a big market, you know, the Airbnb market, and that will continue to grow as obviously the staycations really opened up in the UK as well. And you know, and landlords will have to be flexible with their portfolios, you know, rather than be traditional. But demand is really strong. People need to sleep somewhere. There's a housing shortage.
Exactly. And that leads me straight on. It's a good segue to another question that somebody sent in is, and this is not anything that's happened with us at the moment, but the risk is there, is if a tenant decides to sublet the property through Airbnb, what can a landlord do about it?
Fine, good question. Right, so basically it's about evidence. So if you've got a flat with common parts, you'll have a lease. If you don't do anything about it, you could have your lease forfeited. Yeah. So, you know, I expose on every series subletting scams, always do. Dodgy letting agents stealing rents and serial bad tenants that go from one property to another. So if you've got subletting, the first thing is you need to get proof that they're subletting. So obviously you do the inspections, you speak to neighbours, you look online, yes, you obviously the Airbnb, you'll see all the posts, you see the evidence, you gather all that information. Once you've done that, the problem you've got, I mean, I exposed a subletting scammer on Airbnb. I mean, some of them making 200, 300, 400, 500 quid a night in London or whatever. Easy money, right? And basically, me and the agent confronted on the phone, and she was denying subletting, and we confronted, and there was an American family, of course. they were an innocent party in all this. So then you'd have to go to court and get a court order. But we found with some of these subletting gangs, and there's a lot of big gangs in cities, more in London, where they will, because it's on the periphery of civil, not criminal, they will just long it out until you get eviction date. Because the longer they can stay in a property, yes, you can try and change the locks, but actually they haven't surrendered tenancy, you know, which is a problem. So there's various different other pressure tactics that one can try and do, but you have to go to court for breach of tenancy effectively. Yeah, exactly. And how can a landlord avoid this scenario in the first place? So I think it's really important to have good landlord insurances in place. I'll give a plug for our, so we've got total landlord insurance, so we do all that, and we cover for malicious damage, which is a big problem as well, Dawn. We cover for malicious damage up to 25k. We've had cannabis factories and God knows what and all that, so we do all the landlord insurance for the NRLA as well. So really you'd have to do inspections, you need to qualify, the referencing is key. Is it a company let? A lot of company lets are sham companies. They're not employees. They would try and fool the referencing. You've got to be, it is all about the referencing. A really good letting agent worth their weight in gold should be able to flag it, I hope. Then, of course, the telling questions is there's a really good referencing company called Home PPL. I think it's .com. I did a panel session with them at the Property Investor Show. They've got some really clever tech that can detect subletting, fake passports and stuff like that, which is an issue. Obviously, there's the right to rent checks. Who's going in there? What type of property? Is it a family? Or is it single let use? And then I think what's really important, and I say this when I do my training with landlords, is get to know your neighbours. You know, if you're a professional landlord, you give a card. I'm Paul Shamplina. This is my property. I'm a professional investor. I'm a professional. Here's my card. If you get any problems, please call me. Yeah. And they can be your eyes and ears. Yes, you can, you know, you can have obviously some CCTV put up on an app and all the Ring doorbell stuff and all that type of stuff, which really helps. But if I had a cannabis factory in my property and people coming and going late at night with big black bags and they're sealing up the letterbox and blacking out the windows, I'd rather know it sooner rather than later. So your neighbours are really good. They can give you good ideas. Regular inspections, are they not giving you access? And when you do go in there, is there, you know, 20 pairs of shoes on the floor and 15 toothbrushes and just, you know, just a lot of it's gut feeling. And I think an agent, you know, you've been doing this for 30 years, Dawn, you'll know and you'll get it. And that's where you're hoping a really good agent will protect, and not just making sure you've got a good tenant to pay your rent, but actually looking after your property, because that's your biggest asset. Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Paul. Okay, next question from one of our clients. Do you believe it's a landlord's human right to decide who lives as a tenant in any of his or her rental properties for whatever reason that may be? Definitely. I mean, it's all about risk management. Yeah. So I'll come back to the point. You showed a property yesterday for a landlord. They're paying you a let only, a full management fee. Okay. You've got 11 applicants. Out of the 11, 6 won it. Yeah. Whether there's a bidding war, that's a different story. But I want to pick the best tenant. I want to make sure that the 12 months is my credit agreement. Can they afford to pay the 1,200 quid a month, whatever it is, right? So then we do the applications. Then the agent should qualify and say, actually, I've got this really good couple. They work at the local hospital. He's a doctor. She's no, whatever it may be. You build a profile up. And then, of course, you break down the referencing. Yes, you can't advertise and say, I'm not having a housing benefit tenant. I'm not having this. That is discriminatory. You can't do that. What you can do as a landlord, you have the right of choice to say to your agent, I would like that tenant. And because of the way the demand is and the lack of stock is, landlords have more of those choices now, rather than, you know, dare I say it, a big problem is you get certain type of tenants that will go on various different websites where landlords are doing it themselves. I'm not going to say the website, I don't want to get sued, right? And they will say, Right, and these tenants will qualify the landlords to see if these landlords are clued up, or they're naive, or they're desperate to put a tenant in because they've got to pay the mortgage. They pay 2 or 3 months in advance, maybe pay a deposit, but they haven't got their previous landlord's reference, which or the work reference, which is fake and whatever. And that's qualifying it, because all you're doing with your reference, and that's the key, you're putting a jigsaw together, right? As to, can they afford to pay? Is it legitimate? Can I do some research on that? Yeah. Can I qualify it myself? Not just because the referencing agent has said, yes, it's fine for £40 reference or whatever. And yeah, if they do leave, would I be able to track them down at a later date? What information have I got? You know, the qualifying stage is really important.
Yes, thank you for that. What experiences have you had with rogue letting agents? I think this comes from one of our members of staff. And what advice would you give to people who are looking to appoint an agent?
Good question. So I did, as I said, I did a talk to 100 letting agents only a couple of days ago in Bridlington, just past Hull, and that was for the council, on landlords need letting agents more than ever. So I come across lots of rogue letting agents, not just for my Landlord Action cap, but also my hat for the property redress scheme. So I'm a director of the holding company that owns a property redress scheme. We've got 16,000 members. We don't, you know, we might have over 1,000 investigation of 1,000 complaints, of which some of them are dealt with. And then of course we strike out members that fail to pay the rent or don't give the holding deposit back. 25% of our complaints relate to poor management service. You know, a lot of landlords want a fully managed service, they only get a let only, you know. So really what I would turn around and say, I mean, you know, there's that client money protection, the law, and you know, you and Arla rep, and I do lots of talks for Arla, you know, do they belong to a trade body? What property redress scheme do they belong to? Have they got client money protection in place? That they are the 3 key questions. Their professional indemnity, go into their offices, what's their terms of business, what's the difference between cost-wise between a let only and a fully managed service. Sometimes you'll get landlords that are so price conscious, actually the difference is 15, 20 quid a month or 30 quid a month for full management, and you get that total peace of mind and you don't deal with a tenant, yeah, which is, you know, the peace of mind. And unfortunately a lot of agents to a certain extent also need to understand the landlord better, where they're in their journey. Are they into investment? Are they looking for retirement? Are they looking to, you know, scale up or whatever, and actually understand what the landlord want, how they want it. And landlords need to see that they're letting agents care, they're looking after their properties and be part of their investment journey as buy-to-let experts. So yeah, I mean, the qualifying, you know, getting testimonials, right, really important. Go on to a really good website called allagents.co.uk to see reviews, you know, understand their terms of business, how quickly is the rent passed on, can I get rent guarantee, do you deal with deposit disputes, if there's repairs, what's your process, you know, do you have trusted traders, is there, what are you know, are your costs transparent, you know. I think also what has changed things as well, Dawn, is the Tenants Fee Act, you know, where agents can't charge tenants, and basically for a long time tenants were charged a tenant fee, and that tenant fee was for referencing and for the drafting of the tenancy agreement, but also landlords get that they pay that as well. So I think the industry were double charging for a while, and I think that was right. I think there should be some sort of cap, but ultimately the landlord's going to pay and the rents end up going up. So the tenants don't win in the end to a certain extent. I think a lot of it's down to transparency, but you know, picking the right letting agent most probably is one of the most important things you do with regard to running your portfolio, finding a deal, financing a deal, getting it below market value. That's the sexy stuff. Actually making your property pay over long term, making sure, I mean, 5 things that keep a landlord awake at night, Dom: rent arrears, void periods, that a property's empty for a long period, funding repair issues, how, you know, how do you fund those, government regulation and tax, you know. And I think also it's important that the agent understands that and has that empathy with the landlord.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just choosing the lowest fee either,
No.
because
Cheap is always expensive.
Yes,
I'm a firm believer in that.
Okay, I'm going to go to this. There's a big long question here in the chat box, which I will read out. We are owed £9,000 from a tenant we evicted in late 2019 via the courts. He's a self-employed builder, no assets in his name, all cash in hand. We found out after the eviction he owes money all over the place.
Right.
We engaged a debt recovery company who promised they would do all they could. They've done very little to recover the debt. What are the options, and what, being honest, is the likelihood of recovering this money?
Right, great question. I can answer it.
Okay.
A lot of debt recovery companies are a waste of time. And if they're asking you for monies up front, right, unless they're a regulated firm of solicitors to actually do legal services, they'd be a waste of time. Collecting money from an ex-tenant is the hardest thing to do, because a lot of tenants don't own the assets, or they're renting a fully managed property, and that furniture is the new landlord's. Okay, so what I will be doing is, as that landlord, I know that the tenant's left, albeit it's 2-3 years down the line. A debt lasts for 6 years. What I would look at is, first you've got to try and track them down, try and trace them. If he's a self-employed builder, he will need to try and get credit when he's trying to, possibly on some of the credit places when he's trying to buy, buy trade goods and so forth. I would maybe have a go at possibly, and again, we can help him with that, and it's all fixed fee stuff. So my email address, I'll give it out, is paul@landlordaction.co.uk. And I can introduce that landlord to Andrew, who runs my debt recovery department. Is maybe I'd think about a high court enforcement agent to try and visit the new property. But if he is a builder, he's going to have some tools and he's going to have a van. And actually, without that, he won't be able to trade. So I would look to try and go for that. You seize that, the guy can't trade, he can't earn. So I would look at maybe that. That might be, you can't get an attachment of earnings because he's not employed by a company. Unlikely, whether some tenants do own other properties elsewhere in the country, and they might have relocated. If you have that, that's why the referencing is really important, because you can flag if they, instead if they move to Telford and they've moved down from Manchester, they might have a property in Manchester, and that, so you could get a charge against that. So maybe a high court enforcement, and of course, when you're enforcing it, then it becomes a county court judgment. So unfortunately, the company mentioned, and I've just seen it, we've had various different complaints on before. The RCI company, it's quite a worry actually. That's about the second or third person that I've seen has been paid a lot of upfront money. It's quite worrying actually. I might have to look into that. But yeah, they're not a regulated law firm.
Right.
So yeah, I'm a bit worried that person's paid a big lump fee. But get them to reach out to me.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That's quite interesting and quite scary as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So David said thanks.
I think it's David. Yeah, you just said that. Yeah, David, drop me an email.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Right then. So I'm getting to the end of my questions. Where are we? What is your top piece of advice to anyone starting out as a landlord today?
Really good question. Being a landlord can be a really rewarding business. I think don't be scared of being called a landlord, because the word landlord, people provide it, unfortunately. I think actually it should be called housing provider. I think that the word land and lord and you're my tenant, and I think that's a bit dated, so I've just gone a bit off piece, but that's just my views. I've done a whole blog on that. So as a landlord, it is about diligence. It's about finding the right partners. It's about maybe going to property networking meetings, possibly hearing people, experts like me speak. Don't pay a lot of money for ridiculous amount of courses. That's why I did my course. I charged 39 quid, 2 hour, an hour and a half course. Just watch it online. Don't get sucked in and paying big money for these 12-month courses. You've got to know your area, you've got to know your product, you've got to get your budgeting right, get some business planning right, speak to a financial advisor and a mortgage broker. What deposit? If you don't have to deposit, you can't buy property. People forget that. Forget about the no money down deals. They're really hard to get. Make sure you have a good letting agent. I think a lot of letting agents like you, Dawn, you know, you've been in the game a long time. You're a buy-to-let expert. You know, how can you scale up? How can you look at your portfolio? What type of yield are you looking at? Are you looking stuff at gross or net? And are you building in your tax? Please build your tax in. The game's changed now with Section 24. But we're lucky. The interest rate is minimal. Yes, it's going to go up, you know, but landlords have a short memory. So I think what is really important, I think it's really important. Take your time. You know, at the end of the day, the market's very buoyant. You know, can you generally get a below market value deal? I think you've got to realise the frenzy started. The frenzy started when the stamp duty concession was given by the Chancellor mid first lockdown. You know, and of course, yes, inflation's going to go up, and that's a worry, and wages and all that stuff. But I think also we've got to realise, and if anyone calls recessions on, it's normally me, because I have been in doom and gloom mode for years, working in recessions and what I do. But we're not going to hit a recession. The interest rate's going to go up. But we've got over 1 million job vacancies available in the UK, which is unprecedented. You can't find staff. You know, we've got 10 or 12 job applications we're trying to fill, you know. So I think the economy is going to be strong, but yeah, I mean, and also look at, if you are building a portfolio, you've got a portfolio, mix it up. You've got to look at, you know, mixed use and stuff. And I think obviously the way tenants are looking to live now, they don't have to be in cities, in towns, you know, they can work remotely. And I think that, you know, what is your offering? Understand your competition as well. You know, that's another thing. Landlords just take things for granted. Oh, I've got a property, I'll stick it on, it will rent out. Yeah, maybe. But do you understand that if you're in the cities or you're in big towns, that, you know, you could have big build-to-rent operators near you, and they're big shiny towers of flats, and their rents, you know, are going to be competitive to your rents, or maybe a little bit more, but their offering is completely different, which is basically on-site security and dog walking services and yoga rooms and workspaces. Build-to-rent is increasingly growing. I do a lot of work in the build-to-rent area, but I remember when I do talks to landlords about build-to-rent, hardly any of them know about what build-to-rent is. It is competition for landlords in urban areas.
Yeah.
But also one other thing is, look, subscribe to our website, landlordzone.co.uk. It doesn't cost you a penny. We do breaking landlord news every day. So keep up to speed what's going on in the market. Yeah,
that is really good. I can definitely vouch for that, because it's I always read it, and it's got some really good information coming through. What do you think about HMOs? Because we're finding more people now are obviously, you know, they're subscribing to who is it? It's gone off the top of my head, you know. It's gone. They're looking at sort of, you know, how to maximise your income from property investment, and HMOs, obviously you can get much higher ROI from HMOs. What's your experience? So my experience is this: HMOs are not for the faint-hearted. You can leverage yield unbelievably, but what you need to do is you need to know what you're doing, right? So you know, you've got to be quite dubious about if someone's offering rent to rent on an HMO, what type of organisation they are. Rent to rent is where they take your property over, so I'll give you X amount, and they make the bit on top, but you lose control of your property. I can be quite critical of rent to rent, because that industry, there's a lot of roads in the industry and it needs to be cleaned up. I'm trying to do a bit of that work with the PRS, and also with the government. I'm liaising with trading standards on that. But I think with HMOs, I think what is really important, right, with HMOs is you're going to have strangers living with strangers. So understand the cultures, understand what their work lives are, and their beliefs and what they're doing and how they're doing it and all that stuff, because people have got to get on with that other. If you get one bad tenant in an HMO that kicks off antisocial, they could all leave, cost you a lot of money. We've done a lot of evictions in HMOs.
It's challenging. HMOs, we saw a lot of unlawful evictions happening during COVID because there was no eviction, people that were having COVID and so forth. HMO can work and you can earn a good bit of money with it, but you need to know what you're doing. It's not, and of course, there's extra costs with regard to fire doors and all the other type of regulation stuff that you've got to do. But you can do it, but there is a market for it. There's people that I know that are in the professional HMO business where they've got high-end HMOs, because also with the size of rent, people can't afford to rent out single dwellings. So then self-contained HMOs is the next best thing. And then what market are you in? Are you in looking at the HMO market, the student market? So understanding your markets are really important. Having the right person managing it for you. If you're going into HMOs and trying to manage it yourself first time round, I do not advise that one bit. I mean, I was telling a funny story, just ending this point on HMOs. Because, of course, licensing is a big issue as well, big cost and enforcement, and every borough is different. And you have to understand that. And, we feature that a lot on our TV programme with the HMO landlords that are breaching it with Harrow Council. But I had one dispute. We do evictions generally, antisocial behaviour, drug taking or rent arrears. I mean, they're the main ones that you get in HMOs. But we had one scenario, and this is the God's honest truth, and you've got to realise we've been doing this 22 years, and we reckon we've done the best part of 50, 60, whatever it is, how many thousands of cases. And we had one case where we had to serve a Section 8 notice on a tenant because he was nicking the other tenant's food, believe it or not. He was taking it out of the larder, and that food, Dawn, were Cocoa Pops. So we had to list a Section 8 notice with a covering letter. It was quite funny, actually, but we didn't go to court on it and it resolved the matter. That's why mediation's really important. That's why we started a mediation business. But we served a Section 8 notice for breach of tenancy because one tenant was nicking the other tenant's Cocoa Pops.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
But like you say, it can be very lucrative if you know what you're doing.
Like anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was Property Magic and the Progressive Property Network.
Yeah. So I know Simon Zutzi. I spoke to Simon Zutzi this morning, actually.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So Simon does a lot of training and HMOs and stuff like that. So yeah, I've been to quite a few of his meetings. He's generally quite a good guy, and he tries to educate and stuff. But you get a lot of novices that start it. Yeah. A lot of novices, when they get into this, they don't understand property management. That is the key. That's where they go wrong. Yeah, there's no unicorn or no rainbow at the end of every path. You have to understand it, and you do have to do your education. And that's why it is good to do, maybe some education courses, but don't pay through them. Make sure they get recommended. Get recommended to do things by other landlords. Try and mix with other landlords. Go to NRLA meetings. Join the NRLA. Absolute must.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and one other question I've got here is, and you've mentioned EPCs before. Obviously, with the EPC rating changing to a minimum C from April 2026 now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then a lot of people, I mean, when we promote any investment type properties, we'll always make sure that we're displaying the EPC high on the list of what people need to be looking at, because
yes, of course,
buy a property with a C rated EPC now, then you haven't got to think about it again.
Correct.
For the next sort of few years. But there's a lot of landlords who have got properties with lower EPCs in Ds and Es, for instance, and they're going to have to do some work and change the heating systems. But there's just not that much information available out there at the moment as to what type of heating system do they need to go for. Have you got any advice on that?
You've just answered your own question. There's not enough information out there. I've done, if you go on to, I did a blog with Eddie Hooker, our CEO. We did a Hamilton Fraser blog with Ben Beadle, and we talked about EPCs. Yeah. So if you go onto Landlord Zone and just search EPC podcast, you can listen to the podcast about what we said and how we said it. The problem is, it's the installation. There's, like with every government announcement, there's a lack of detail. And what happens is, a lot of the time, a lot of the civil servants and the politicians, they don't understand the practicality of bringing stuff in. I know this for a fact from engagement stuff, and I've had civil servants in my office here at Landlord Action or Hamilton Fraser, where we've engaged and we've given them the hardcore stats on a whole load of stuff, you know. So the answer is you're quite right. If you are doing investment stuff, what grading, because you've got to factor in that cost. But we're waiting for more detail. And of course, that will be a barrier for a lot of landlords that will sell. I mean, that's a given.
Yeah, it is very difficult at the moment, because, you know, if a heating system needs changing now, for instance, then what can they do? You know,
well, I don't think you'll have enough installers. I mean, that's another issue.
Yeah, I mean, on our last webinar, we had a guy from a local company who does the heat pumps, source and ground source heat pumps, and that was really interesting. But again, it's just trying to find out sort of how much that would improve the EPC buy, and getting those sort of tests done to start with, and looking into that as well. And it's not just the heating system, it's the installation as well, isn't it? So
it's cost.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I think that was my last question, and we've done quite well actually, because we've almost hit an hour, which is what we'd sort of planned for this. So just confirm your, I mean, I will send it out on the when we send out the recording of this, your email address, Paul. Is it paul@landlordaction.co.uk?
Yeah, so there's paul@landlordaction.co.uk, and then there's my website, which is like the training and also the online course, which is paulshamplina.tv.
Right, okay, thank you for that. We'll send both of those out to everyone. And so thank you so much, Paul, for joining our webinar today. It's been really, really interesting, and I hope everybody has found it as interesting as I have. Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you to those who are watching afterwards on the recording. Hope you've all enjoyed it today. We will also be planning a live landlord event in the spring/summer at a centralised venue, which I've been talking to Paul about presenting there as well. So that will be our first sort of landlord event for about 3 years, because they've all been sort of online. So I will send further details out to everybody on that shortly, and you'll be able to see and meet Paul face to face at that event as well.
You can meet me face to face, and if I've still got some left, I'll give you a landlord action stress ball.
Fantastic. Well, who can turn down that?
On par with a Blue Peter badge. What can I say, Dawn?
Brilliant. But thank you again, Paul.
Pleasure.
And thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Take care. All the best. Bye.